Welcome to the Silver Room. I am so excited to be here today. My name is Julie Elise Landry, and I will be talking with two writers in their first semester of our MFA program, Sonny Gray and Joby Mire. First, we'll listen to Sonny read a chapter from their novel in progress. Then Joby will bewitch us with some poems. And afterward, I'll have questions about what they've written and what common themes I've observed between the two writers. So, Sonny, Joby, are y'all ready to get started? Awesome. Sonny Gray is a Gulf Coast native in their first year of studying fiction at UNO's MFA program. They are particularly interested in writing about the South or people who come from the South, with focuses on themes of queerness, sickness, and madness. Sonny, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Dion's possessive hand gripped mine as he led me through the crowd of paparazzi to the restaurant. His driver sped away and would be back in a couple of hours. The paparazzi were snapping pictures of us, hand in hand, and yelling stuff at us I didn't catch. I don't think I ever got used to that, but those moments of sensory overload for me were the lullabies Dion was brought up on. "Reservation for the last name cave," he said once inside. I looked around the building. My manager and Dion's sat on opposite sides of the glass bar waiting for our word. We were led to a corner booth. All the walls were made of glass, so the paparazzi could still see in. I caught more camera flashes out of the corner of my eye. We sat in the booth, which blocked us from outside perception, and opened the menus. Dion, newly 21, ordered a Jack and Coke, while I ordered a Sprite, still merely 20. I looked over at the menu, my eyes glazing over the prices. Sure, Mama and I had financial success and stability since I had my big break 4 years ago, but we didn't immediately blow our wealth on crazy dinners. We still ate takeout and lived together, and Mama kept her full-time job. But Dion was probably nursed on formula as expensive as the steaks here. My theory was confirmed when I asked what he was thinking of eating. "Probably just a good old burger," he said, and I checked the price. $100 for a burger. Wagyu beef burgers, but still. Mama would, no doubt, if she were there, make a joke about how the restaurant better kill and flay the cow in front of us for that price. I suggested mozzarella sticks. Appetizers as a meal was my go-to growing up, and Mama and I would typically share. "I'll have to steal one or two," Dion said. I set the menu down and looked at him. "You better pay me back then." I was determined to remain on equal footing with him financially, neither one of us indebted to one another. It never worked. His brows furrowed just below his beanie. Only Dion could get away with wearing beanie and streetwear to a restaurant that fancy and highbrow. I had always admired his confidence. The thought, "I don't belong," never crossed his mind, but I suppose most places were built for guys like him. Still, I admired it at the time. "What you mean?" he asked. "I'm paying." I sighed. Every time we went out to eat, we had this same argument, and then eventually when the check came, he'd always snatched it up before I could even realize it had arrived. I stared him down and shook my head. "No, you're not paying for me." He smiled and went back to scanning his menu. "Yes, I am." "We've had this conversation before." A small nod from him. "Indeed we have." "I don't want to be in debt to you," I said, exactly like I had previous times. "I don't like IOUs and shit." "And I told you I don't think of it that way," he said, still not looking at me. Nikita, our server, circled back then. "Have we decided what we want to eat?" Dion set his menu down, leaned on his elbows on the table. "What do you recommend?" Nikita smiled like she had been waiting for this question. "Personally, I recommend our tomahawk steak, but only if you're splitting it." In a quick moment, Dion glanced at me, and I challenged him with my eyes. He grinned up at Nikita and said, "We'll do that." "Dion," I warned. "Aria." He gave me a smug smile. I softened at his expression. He always had to get his way, make his point. I loved him for it. Nikita looked at me expectantly, and I nodded, and then she took our menus, folding them under her arm as she left. "You're unbelievable," I said, and leaned back into the seat cushion. "You love me. I challenge you." "I actually hate you," I said. "Oh, so does this mean we should turn down this movie?" He cocked a brow, then slid his drink toward me. "Loosen up." I looked around and decided, what the hell. I grabbed the cup, the glass cool against my palm, and gulped the last of his drink, warm flooding my chest as I swallowed. My fingertips pushed the empty glass back across the table. "We really should talk about this movie, though," I said. "It's the whole reason we're here." He feigned offense with a hand over his chest and an open jaw. "You mean you aren't here because you enjoy my company? You're not simply grateful that I'm your friend?" I shrugged, playing along with the bit. "Hate to break it to you, but I just hate being in your presence so much. This is only business for me." His fingertip traced the ring of his cup, and the chandelier that hung over us made the blocky gold ring on his pointer finger glint in the light. No pleasure? A hint of hope in his voice. My stomach flipped in on itself when I looked into his eyes, gleaming with anticipation of my response. I knew he always held out for this possibility, but it made me feel guilty when it showed up like this. Early into our time on the show, Dion and I were sitting in his car, passing a joint back and forth, listening to music. The windows fogged, and we didn't yet know if Hunters, our show, would be picked up for a second season. I was giggling about something, probably nothing, because I laugh uncontrollably while high, and I saw Dion staring at me from the corner of my eye. I shifted my glance over to him, passing the thin and burning stick from my fingers to his. What? I blew out smoke. I just think you're really beautiful, he said, taking a hit and examining the joint, not daring to look at me as I processed the statement. My smile faltered, but only for a split second. I kept it up. Thank you. I focused forward through the windshield and hoped the conversation would end there, that we would turn to talking about something else. I think every girl I know understands the feeling I had in my stomach then, the fear that if I made eye contact with him, he would try to kiss me. Thankfully, he had the sense not to make a physical move. Fuck it, Dion whispered to himself, then readjusted to sit more upright. I'm going to say something because I'm not sure if we're going to be able to work together in the future. I like you, Aria, a lot, and I was wondering if I could take you out sometimes. My worst fears were realized in front of me, and quite possibly at the worst time. Both of us high and trapped in his vehicle in an empty parking lot, not a walkable distance to anywhere I knew. I turned to him, my lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Dion, I started, and he nodded with a haze of sadness. I get it, he said. I'm sorry. I truly meant it. I felt awful about the whole thing. Don't be. He tried to laugh it off, but I knew his chest felt heavy, just like mine. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? I forced a laugh. I really do care about you, I tried, but he cut me off. Just not in that way. I get it. He wouldn't look at me, and I'd wondered at the time if he ever would again. Some girl is going to be so lucky to have you one day, I said, and he had given me a solemn nod and thanked me. As I looked at him in the restaurant that night, I still believed that. He was a conventionally attractive guy, tall, lean, with blonde hair that was shiny in a male model for shampoo commercials way that fell to his shoulders. I just never was attracted to him, and I don't think you can force attraction. It's just something that happens. No pleasure, I said back to him. After the meal, Dion took my hand, ready to lead me through the same craziness from before. This time, I needed the guidance even more in my tipsy state. As soon as we stepped outside, the paparazzi's lights and shouts were in full swing again. Frantic, that time, each microphone pushed closer to us and with much more fervor than the last. They closed in on us from all sides, literally backing us into a wall. It had never been that bad before. The reporter closest to me shoved a microphone in my face. Aria, do you have anything to say to victims like Cassie criticizing your friendship with Dion? I blinked at him. Dion's grip on my hand tightened. We looked at each other, and Dion's eyes betrayed him. He knew more than I did. Who the fuck is Cassie? I asked. I almost laughed. Dion tried to pull me, but my feet were planted to the ground. A million answers from the surrounding reporters. One of them said, "She's accusing Dion of assault." Dion's hold on me was so strong, I wondered if my hand would be bruised the next day. I stared at him, then back at the reporter. One more tug from Dion and my feet unstuck from the concrete. I went limp and let him drag me into his car. The second the door shut behind us, Dion was on the phone with his manager, frantic. His sentences made little sense to me. I looked out the window as the driver pulled away. Click, flash, flash, flash. We'd be all over the tabloids the next day, no doubt. Who the fuck is Cassie? Ed said. That would surely be a headline. My lips trembled. He looked back at me and rolled his eyes. Fucking hell, he whispered. Then louder into the phone, he said, "That's your job, to figure this shit out. I gotta go." "Take me home," I said to the driver. "Do not," demanded Dion. "Just let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said. "She's lying, right?" Dion grabbed my shoulder. I flinched away from his touch and he pulled back. "Right?" I asked again, my voice wavering for only a moment. "Yes," he said, "so let's just go to the club, please, and forget about her." My stomach flipped again. I don't feel good. I just want to go home. I paused and met his eyes. Plus, it'll look really bad if you go out partying right now. Maybe you should do some damage control. Dion's nostrils flared. Take her home, he said to the driver. A long minute passed in silence. She's lying. You gotta believe me. I don't even know this girl. His voice was pleading with me. Yeah, I said, agreeing. She's lying. I'm still not sure if I was trying to convince him or myself that I believed it. My breath was quickening. Thankfully, we were only moments from my house, only a couple minutes to go. Arya, please. His eyes were unreadable for the first time, like a film had grown over his irises. I think he knew I needed more convincing. Would I lie to you? The truth was, I didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonny. That was honestly a rude place to leave us in suspense. How dare you? All I want is to interrogate you about where that story is going, but it's not that kind of interview, and it's time to hear from Joby. Joby Mire was born and raised in French Louisiana and spent his formative adult years living in Southern California. He studied psychology at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and the California School of Professional Psychology. He then switched to studying English literature with a focus on the early modern period at California State University, Long Beach, and is now back in New Orleans, where he studies English creative writing in the genre of poetry at the University of New Orleans. Joby is the proud cat dad of three beautiful black cats whose names I will let you say, Joby, because I don't know how to pronounce one of them.
Power, Magus, and Endora.
So what spells will you be casting on our listeners today, Joby?
All right, so the first one is a poem called Fang, and it's about imperfection. Fang. Braces by a decade, 2 rounds of aligners by 3. Yet the fang remains, the imperfection too powerful, vampiric like that of some great beast, unmoved. Lifting weights 3 to 5 times a week, yet I am still Donatello's David, not Michelangelo's. Only full of emptiness, only near to longing, only rich in consequences bought by poor choices. Yet still, I am more than the sum of all my disorders. And besides, I'd rather be out of my mind than stuck in my head. Uniqueness in perfection is the art of imperfection. Thank you. My next poem is about New Orleans. It's called Southern Gay Salome. In a land lower than the deep of southern sea levels, there is a place, some say like Sodom, but we call the city of the Crescent. On St. Louis and Rue Burgundy lies the court of the corner pocket, where kings that cakes are named after converse in the quarter, and I, gay Salome, undress with the other modern catamites on pins and needles. I emerge from the narrow hall of the locker room, purple poppy jockstrap over my loins, locker key banded around my bicep, and American bills stuffed in my chucks. Drag Queen Herodias announces my honorific titles, all but aliases. I climb the steps up to the pedestal of the bar and shed 7 invisible veils for my spectators, dancing on laps and leaping through heads. Beholden my body, last veil of the 7, costing more than the gold of hell and of heaven, and tetrarchs of Nola pay me tributes demanded of green heads and white lines on silver chargers. The next poem is about a monster that's very well known in southern Louisiana, especially French Louisiana. It's called the Rougarou. The Rougarou. Be good, little BB. Don't be like me. Born under a bad sign, a witch child bitten by the Rougarou, cursed by God to rub myself with mojo grease and become the beast that haunts and vaunts with prowling steps that beat like the percussions of voodoo drums, burdening the air with spells and enchantments that breed phantasms as I list, teaching to others the accursed tongue of a foul soul. And at the witching hour I grow restless, craving young blood, fresh and fruitful as the Sodom apples I feed to those who lust for knowledge that I feign, like the vain queen feeds Snow White, tearing down woody temples and bayou altars, shouting at devils in the night. Now to destroy is my delight, so beware of this plight. Block the chimneys, lock the shutters, say your prayers or hide. You don't want me lurking at your bedside, or fatal consequence will find you in its clutches, and you will become a ferocious creature like me, half human, half hellhound or howling wolf. My horrid presence hovers over the humid swamp like some spectral mist or banshee breeze. Like a Cajun werewolf or folk Catholic vampire, I will suck out your soul, your impulses entice, and leave you an empty vessel for vice, as sweet as the sugar-cane fields that I stalk. So goodbye, Sunday school, goodbye, moralities. There's no more Lent to repent, no more holiday trees, just woodlands and wetlands, bayous and bats, graveyards and ghouls, midnights and moonlights shining over nights full of hate, and this is my fate, a villainous tyrant, poisoning all that I see with gruesome gree-gree. All right. My next poem is an American sentence. It's called AH, or Artificial Head. His fleshlight collection is like Langwidier's heads. Each one feels different. And then I'm going to end this with a reading from one of my favorite poets, William Blake. This is an excerpt from America, a Prophecy. Fiery the angels rose, and as they rose, deep thunder rolled around their shores, indignant burning with the fires of arc, and Boston's angel cried aloud as they flew through the dark night. He cried, "Why trembles honesty? And like a murderer, why seeks he refuge from the frowns of his immortal station? Must the generous tremble, and leave his joy to the idle, to the pestilence, that mock him? Who commanded this? What God, what angel, to keep the generous from experience, till the ungenerous are unrestrained performers of the energies of nature, till pity is become a trade, and generosity a science that men get rich by, and the sandy desert is given to the strong? What God is he, writes laws of peace, and clothes them in a tempest? What pitying angel lusts for tears and fans himself with sighs? What crawling villain preaches abstinence and wraps himself in the fat of lambs? No more I follow, no more obedience pay. So cried he, rending off his robe and throwing down his scepter in sight of Albion's guardian. And all the 13 angels rent off their robes to the hungry wind and threw their golden scepters down on the land of America. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joby, for the energy of that reading. That was hypnotizing. But I am going to shake off the swirls in my eyes, and I'm going to focus back on Sonny for a second. As much as I want you to just tell me the rest of this story, I know that it is a work in progress, and it's certainly better to leave all of us future readers in suspense. But I will ask you some questions about these characters. From this first chapter, the first words even, we know that Dion is possessive, domineering, entitled. We know that Arya is guarded, defensive, but also capitulating. A truly interesting combination of someone who has a sure sense of her boundaries, while simultaneously forgiving the instances when those boundaries are, like, dismissed. How do you approach establishing characters like these? How did you find the right starting scenario to communicate so much so quickly?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I will say I have been like percolating on this novel idea for like 2 years. So I was like, I had the idea of like writing about this kind of a scenario, and then I was at a writing retreat and just like listening to a bunch of people talking about writing, and I just was like, okay, I have to start this novel because I was so energized with the retreat that I was at, and I did a lot of planning. I'm a planner. I'm not a pantser at all. So I sat down one day and was like, okay, I need to think about like who would be in this kind of a situation. And I had the look of like what they looked like in my head. And then weirdly, the first thing that I decided on was their names, because they are the names are inspired by Greek mythology, and like Dion means like devotee of Dionysus, essentially. And a huge part of his character is that he's like a party guy. He's always out like doing stuff, and is just has always been one for a good time. Because the title of the novel is Harmless Fun, which, spoiler alert, it is not harmless. But and then Aria, her full name is Ariadne, which is obviously like a play on Ariadne, who is the wife of Dionysus. So that was kind of how I decided it. And then I just was playing with the idea of Ariadne's story and like how she was so secluded and like isolated on that island. That's how she got with Dionysus. And that informed a lot of their character, because as you find out throughout the novel, they're mostly friends because Arya had nobody else. And he swooped in and was like, hey, you can be my best friend. And she didn't have a good sense of what friendship should be. So she just stuck with him. And she continues to stick with him because he's comfortable. He's all she knows. And deciding to get rid of that is very hard. So.
Well, you kind of already like jumped to one of my other questions that I had, so I'm just going to skip around a little bit and I'm going to ask you, it sounds like you did have like an initial thing, an initial grain that got you into writing this story. Was it a particular scene, character, setting, or the theme? And if it's too spoilery, you don't have to tell us.
No.
But I'm curious.
Yeah, actually, so it is inspired by like actual real events that I've seen happen online, like about certain actors and people in the Hollywood space, and like the very specific like people in my head that I came up with are inspired by real actors that had a situation like this occur a couple of years ago. But then with the Neil Gaiman stuff that came out, like end of last year, early this year, that was really the thing that like gave me the kick to really start writing this story. But yeah, it was more so I think a lot about there's a lot of stories about, you know, the victims of these things, and I have always wondered, what about like the women in these men's lives who aren't necessarily like the ones that they're doing it to, but are like on the sidelines? What are their stories? And that is kind of how that was the idea, and I built out from there. So.
Well, I certainly cannot wait to read the whole thing when it is eventually on our shelves. I know, switching like maybe a little bit away from the actual story, I know from your bio and also just from knowing you that you are specifically interested in the Southern Gothic tradition, and there's obviously a Southern vibe in the character Arya. What is it about the South and specifically Southern darkness that feels so interesting to you as a writer and feels so unique and compelling to me as a reader in this like LA movie star type setting?
Yeah, so I will say, to speak to specifically Arya really quickly, she grew up in where her backstory is kind of inspired by my own, growing up in the panhandle of Florida, and always just kind of feeling like an outsider wherever I go because of that experience. And I think that gets to the core of why I think Southern Gothic and Southern literature is so interesting, is because of this just underlying feeling that something is wrong, and you are an outsider or something like that, especially queer characters feeling like outsiders. And Arya as well is also a queer character. Um, I hope that came across. But yeah, I think growing up for me in the South, I always felt like there was something a little bit wrong with me because I wasn't like everybody else. But there is something also to say that I don't know if I could ever live outside of the South because of that's how I grew up and it's all I know. And I do think there's a lot of beauty to the South, and sometimes for me that beauty also comes from making the beautiful really grotesque and awful at the same time. And like atmosphere is a large part of Southern Gothic that I'm really interested in, is like the crumbling houses and the bayous, and the feeling that the soil that the town is built on is cursed by something. yeah, that's what I'm really interested in. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for those answers. But I can't keep ignoring my fellow poet. So I'm going to talk to Joby a little bit and give you a break. Joby, you are someone who, kind of like what we were just talking about, that you are in conversation with like the supernatural. From we've got William Blake's prophetic voice to the Rougarou to your trio of black cats. Tell us a little bit about your poetic lineage, about what captivates you in the occult and the poetry of the occult.
Well, so starting off, my favorite is John Milton and Paradise Lost. So just like the angels and the devils of that, like, are to me the interesting characters. Sin, I think, is probably the most interesting speaker in Paradise Lost. She's just so fun. And then down from that is William Blake, who was obviously a mystic and is a saint in some religions. Some magical religions. And then after him, I would say William Blake, who is famously, was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and like the occult and magic are really influential in his poetry. Actually, my favorite book, I think, I'm going to give like a little display, is this On Magic and the Occult by W.B. Yeats. And I just love this book in its entirety. I love that it's like a little pocket, the color of it, the little bookmark. And then after that, coming to the American side, I really love Edgar Allan Poe, to start off. And then from him, we have really great gay poets like Robert Duncan, who was the first American public homosexual. He was the first, yeah, he was the first person of notoriety in America to openly display his, or like openly state his homosexuality, when he wrote an article called "The Homosexual in Society," and he was very much into HD, who herself, was very mystical, magical poet, and he, the Western esoteric tradition is heavily influenced on his poetry. And then after him, we have another great gay poet, James Merrill, who famously wrote the epic poem The Changing Light at Sandover, which is him and his partner talking to spirits through the Ouija board. And I would say that's probably the greatest modern epic that there is, in my opinion, but in several other people's. So I hope, I know I will never live up to them, but I hope to kind of be in that lineage. That's who I look to.
Thank you so much. I love anytime I ask that question and I immediately learn something inevitably and get a reading list. Some of those things I am familiar with, some of them I'm not. So I'm excited to go back and write those things down and explore them myself. I'm also fascinated in your poetry that you work a lot with diction, with voice, using language and syntax from like more historical periods and then switching to some more contemporary French Louisiana language. How do you go about bringing your voice to the page? Are you a particularly like auditory writer, reading things aloud to see how they sound, or are you more concerned with the visual of the language on the page?
No, it's all about the oration. That's how I got into poetry, was that I would just recite Paradise Lost. Like, I have whole sections committed to memory. I'm going to be doing a section from Paradise Lost at Gold Room too, so sneak preview, if y'all want to hear that, come to Gold Room. Um, and I just fell in love. Like every time I felt sad or angry, upset, needed some kind of regulation, I just recite Paradise Lost. And so that's kind of where, because before, like I said in my, like you said in my intro, before this I studied English literature, and then I switched over to creative writing. So that's really what got me into literature and into poetry, was just like reciting it to myself and just like learning these poems that I could say, and so it all is about how it sounds for me.
And I mean that it's very clear, right, in your writing because the sonics they hit, and there's the rhythm and the energy, and it all just it goes. It's like you're on a rail line and you're just shooting forward through the poem. It's fantastic. as you were talking about your history studying English literature, you've also spent a lot of time studying and working in the field of psychology. How
Yeah.
do those experiences manifest in your poetry? Do you feel psychological language or frameworks? Do you find them weaving into your poems?
I mean, I try to, especially in Fang, like that's kind of like, so that poem was inspired like this tooth I have. I call it my Fang because I've had braces and so much Invisalign and it just does not move. Like it will not. And you know, and I respect it for that now because I'm like, you are steadfast tooth. So I call it my vampire Fang to like make me kind of like come to like terms and like the imperfection in some kind of way. And so that really is what inspired Fang. And then like also like being in the gay world, there's such a pressure to like look good and have a great body and all this stuff. And so like those were the kind of two things that I felt like psychologically I really struggled with about my image, like growing up. And so I try to write. I will say I'm very vain in this way. The speaker is often me. I have trouble I have trouble separating the speaker of a poem from myself unless I'm like attempting to write like a long poem in which there are characters and it's more narrative. It's about me. Sorry, spoiler alert. But
I think that is broadly true of most poets. It's not all poets, a lot, but it certainly happens.
yeah, I mean I see Sonny and like creating these characters and I'm just like, how do you do it? Like I can't I don't know. So that's a lot of my poetry is me working through like psychological things in my life or in my own psyche. So yeah, that definitely plays a part in that. Hopefully someday though I'll be able to get into the psychology of like other characters and like have something different for me.
You'll get there. You will inevitably have to write a big long epic poem, and you will get little psychotic characters all mixed in there, and I'm very excited to read it. And this topic also kind of leads me into some of the commonalities I've observed between the two of you. You're both working from the Southern lens. You're both curious about the workings of the mind and like the darkness that sometimes can be inside the mind. There's also elements of like attraction at play in what each of you wrote. So I would love if you would both talk about the sort of cinematic textures that you're using to depict these charged, intimate moments, the tight quarters of a parked car, the spectacle of dancing for dollars. How and where do you both find that electricity in your writing?
Take it away, Sonny.
That is such a good question. I'm not sure I know how to answer it. It's so good. Can you clarify a little bit like what you mean, like finding that electricity of a scene? Like, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so like there's just now it in your the moment I'm thinking of that parked car, it's a darker moment, right? There's a danger in that. But there is still like the even sometimes in those dangerous moments, there's that charge that goes in between the two people who are in that tight space, and one of them wants something, and I don't know, it seemed very deft. And I was just wondering if that was purposeful and
Yeah.
how and why.
Yeah, totally. I think for me, in terms of like this story, this novel that I'm writing, the theme of like attraction, it is definitely at play like throughout it because it's obvious from the beginning of their friendship that Dion is attracted to Arya. She is not attracted to him. Nothing is ever going to go anywhere. And that kind of tension of like he knows that it's not going to go anywhere and he still tests it every once in a while, because that's just who he is as a person. He likes to test boundaries and see what he can get away with, and Arya is very avoidant as a character, so she'll just be like, well, that's just who he is, whatever. And it plants a seed of doubt in her head of like, well, he's always been attracted to me, but he's never really made a physical move. So, like, how do I know what's true and what's not about what some of these girls who are, coming forward are saying? Which obviously is flawed logic. Arya is not a perfect person. She is actually quite the opposite. But I think it's important to the story that I'm trying to tell of like, there is attraction there, however one-sided it is, and still nothing really happens. So attraction and like the kind of fear of how that's going to show up, I think charges a lot of scenes, especially as it gets further into the novel. And other factors are at play of like she ends up getting a love interest, and there's also like some addiction at play. And so when she's under the influence, things become a little bit, muddier. And I think that like charge from earlier scenes of showing that it is there, it's just she's doubting it, and then it coming back when she's like not fully of sound mind, really heightens the stakes. Joey, take it away.
All right, so I already kind of gave the backstory to Fang, so I'll talk about the other ones now. So obviously Salome is the biblical character who is blamed, I guess, although it seems like she was more of like a political pawn, but she was blamed for the beheading of John the Baptist because she danced for Herod the Great and um, asked for John the Baptist's head in return. And then there's, of course, the Oscar Wilde play, Salome, which is like my third favorite play. And there is an artist and choreographer by the name of Lindsay Kemp. And he once did a production where it was like an all-male production of Salome. And he played Salome in drag. And Herodias was also in drag. And I always just like wanted to do that, like being just an all gay male version of Salome where like all the females were like gender swapped, and um I never got around to it. I never got the opportunity yet may still come, but so I just sat with that for so long, and then I was like, I've got to get this out some kind of way, so I'm going to make a poem about it. And I used to go dance at a very divey bar here in the French Quarter called the Corner Pocket. And so I was like, well, let me take that character, kind of embody it, and like speak it into my own experience. And so that's where that kind of came around, from that frustration of like really wanting to be that character and never getting the opportunity. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to write myself into that character. And that made Southern Gay Salome. And the Rougarou is obviously a Cajun kind of folkloric monster. It's after the French loup-garou, which is like the French word for werewolf. And my grandmother used to tell me stories all the time growing up about the Rougarou, and if like you're bad, the Rougarou is going to come get you. She said it quite often, so I was like, oh. And then I was working a I was doing a long-term sub job at the end of a school year a couple years ago, and we were giving like makeup, like standardized tests at the end of the year. So like we had a lot of time in the library just sitting around with the students while they were like making up their tests. And so I found this book called Gumbo Yaya, and it was like a collection of like Cajun and Creole folk tales, and one of them was about the Rougarou. And so I read it, and I fell in love with the story, and it made me think of my grandmother, who was a major influence in my life, especially like literary. Like she would read to me, sitting in her rocker, and those are some of my best memories. And so I loved the story. They would talk about how the Rougarou would like rub itself with this kind of grease, and that's how like it would transform, and that like witches turned people into the Rougarou, or they turned themselves into Rougarous, and kind of like tormented bad Catholics during Lent, who weren't following their Lenten penance. um, and so I really kind of wanted to take some like darker emotions and like really channel that into this kind of character of the Rougarou. Um, and still like I wanted some gay undertones to come through. I don't know if they do, but like one of my friends who's a writer as well, he was like, no, it's definitely like you could tell this is written by a gay man, like about this monster. And I was like, okay, fab. um And so that's where that kind of came from. And then what was the other one? Oh, the American Sentence, Artificial Head, which just came. It came from, I was talking to a friend and he was telling us about his fleshlight collection. He was like, I don't know how, but I've just wound up with so many fleshlights because they all feel different. And I just thought that that was so funny. And I wrote it down and I was like, I have to put that into something. And I really wanted to write an American Sentence. So I was like, I'm going to use that. And I'm going to use the character of Langwidere, who Princess Langwidere is a character from the Oz books. She is the princess of Eve, which is a neighboring country to Oz, and she has different heads that she changed. She has all these collection of beautiful heads that she changes out like her wardrobe, and that's the way she kind of expresses emotion and has different feelings, is by changing out her heads, because they each kind of have like a different personality and like a different emotion. And so I was like, oh, let me play on that. Each one feels different, like her heads. And so that's where that kind of came about from.
That's fantastic. I love the mental connection between those two things and how well they do honestly fit together. That's fantastic. And then also uh, our fellow classmate in the program, Gus Berg, first person who's been able to get the Q&A to work, also pointed out that you're both working in like folklore, Greek mythology, the occult, like you're both touching on those things. So I thought that was a great observation worth sharing. Also, if other people are able to get the Q&A to work, please feel free to ask our writers some extra questions. But I'm going to keep going with what I had. So yet another thing that the two of you have in common is that you are both brand new to our MFA program at the University of New Orleans. What interested you about getting an MFA, and what has been the most exciting thing so far about the program at UNO?
Okay, I can go first again. So I decided I wanted to get an MFA a couple years ago, after I found creative writing as an academic like pursuit. I didn't know that that was a possibility until my last year of high school. I was doing dual enrollment courses, and my mom was like, "Hey, you write good essays. You might as well take the creative writing course." To like, I had to do like one more elective, and I mean, I had already been kind of writing, but like through like a fan fiction lens. I was on all the apps in middle school, and so having my mom push me and be like, "Hey, you should like just do it. It'd be fun," really helped me. And then I got in there, and I had a wonderful professor, Dr. Vicky Hunt. May she rest in peace. She told me that she could see my name on bookshelves one day, and I went, okay, I'm going to continue this then. Having a professor like tell me that I could do it really helped. And then I got into my undergrad program, and I had another phenomenal professor who was really amazing and really kept, telling me like, you can do this, you should do this, keep going, like really encouraging. And I think about my sophomore year, I was like, okay, real talk. What do I have to do to be you in 10 to 15 years? I was like, what do I have to do to be able to teach this thing and be the next Dr. Vicky Hunt or next Professor Chopin for another student who doesn't think that they can do it, but I think they can? Like, that's what I want to do. And he was like, you got to get an MFA. I said, okay, I can do that. I can do that. I was really drawn to this program in particular just because I was hoping to stay in the South because that is like mostly what I write about. And I came to New Orleans a couple times throughout my life for different like sporting events and stuff. It always has kind of felt a little bit inevitable that I ended up back here. So yeah, that's been the thing that's been most interesting to me. I like in the first year of the program, Joby can also speak to this because he's also in this class with me, but we are in the pub lab class together, and that has been like such an amazing opportunity that I feel like a lot of other places don't have an opportunity like that. I mean, a lot of schools have like their lit magazines, but not everybody has the opportunity to work with an author to publish their book. And it has really made me fall in love with the publishing side of writing as well, because before this I was like, I probably don't want to, but now I am considering it. So yeah, that's my answer.
What about you, Joby?
Okay, so As I said before, I previously started in English literature. Well, so I started in psychology, and then I decided that therapy was not my calling, and I probably didn't care much about people's problems as I thought I did. Just kidding. But I figured that I learned after like a few years of grad school in psychology that like therapy was probably not my calling, and I really loved English, and I always loved English, but was kind of like pressured as a first generation college student to either be a doctor or an engineer, and I'm terrible at math. And so, and I'm pretty squeamish. I don't like blood and all that stuff. Well, not too bad, but I don't think I could do surgery on people or like things like that, and I don't want that responsibility. So I was like, well, I'll go into psychology, and then so I did that for a little while, and I really just was not happy, and so I switched over to English, and I went to CSULB, and I had to take prerequisites in order to switch over from psychology to English. So I did my prerequisites there, and I took a couple graduate level classes after I finished my prereqs, and I just thought like maybe my mind is better at creative writing because like I'm super ADHD, and like writing those like long research essays one after another was like very difficult and strenuous to get through. And so I was like, I think my mind is better geared to like write creatively than it is to write, research based. And in addition to that, like Sunny said, being a professor in English literature, it's like the job market is very oversaturated with people with PhDs. So I was like, if I'm already like, like miserable, like, writing these essays, like, do I really want to get a PhD when I could, like, there are PhDs in creative writing, but obviously they're a lot more rare. MFA is pretty much the terminal degree, and you can get a good teaching, position at a university with that. So I decided, I'm going to give it a try. And I moved back to New Orleans recently from California, and I was like, I do not want to move, so I'm going to apply at UNO, and if I get in, great. If I don't, then I'll figure something else out, in my life. And fortunately, I applied, sent in my writing sample, I got accepted, and and also I really wanted to do this because my work is so uniquely like regional from my heritage that I'm like the teachers at UNO are uniquely situated to understand the nuances and guide me in the nuances of that kind of stuff, when it comes to both French culture, Cajun Creole culture, but also like we're a very supernatural city. We're a very like witchcraft, vampires, like gothic, kind of city. And so I was like, that's also going to be really understood by the teachers and by my peers here. And so yeah, that's my story.
That's awesome. Well, I'm super glad you're both here. It's been a treat getting to know both of you just as people and also as writers, and especially getting to hear these works that you've shared with us today. I know we're a little bit over, but I'm going to ask one more question, and you can answer this one briefly. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. What is the first thing that each of you remembers writing, and what did that feel like?
Mine was a fan fiction in middle school. And I just remember like having fun with it. Like that, I think it was just fun, and it wasn't like I didn't have to worry about people hating it because I was like, one, nobody in my life knew that I wrote it, so that was great. But I think ever since I've been like chasing that like high of like just having fun with the writing. And to bring it back to the novel, I had a friend recently tell me that you can tell in every word that like I had a good time writing this. And she said it like it reads like fan fiction, but I mean it in the sense that you sound like you had a good time while you wrote it. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I'm going for. So that's my answer.
So I actually have a relative who is a Cajun children's book author. Her name is Mary Alice Fontenot. She's passed away now, but she wrote the Clovis Crawfish novels. And so when I was younger, my grandmother would get me the books, and like I met her and she would like sign the books for me and stuff like that. And so I kind of wrote a fan fiction as well of like a Clovis Crawfish novel that I kind of wanted to see. It wasn't exactly in line with the kind of stuff she wrote, but still it was kind of my own story of Clovis Crawfish. And so that's, I think, the first thing I can like really remember writing.
That's fantastic. I love both of those answers as someone who also got my start in fan fiction, as so many of us do. But Sunny, Joby, thank you all so much for enrapturing me today. I cannot wait to see what you accomplish in this program. Our next Silver Room is going to be Sunday, December 7th, with two fictionistas, Nola Femino and Morgan Huffstadter. It has been a long time since I've fully stepped out of poetry brain, so I'm looking forward to reconnecting with my roots as a fiction writer during my conversations with them. But until then, we'll see y'all out there on the silver screen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. You did great.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for watching.
Yes, thank you.